I grew up humiliated. I grew up afraid to open my mouth. I'm a stutterer. I said my first understandable word at 4. I went to speech school for many years. They actually taught me where to put my tongue in my mouth and how to make sounds. So part of what happens, if you could remember your own childhood, is that when people are different, they're made fun of. And so I spent most of my childhood with kids making fun of me, laughing. Got elementary school, where the kids on the street were mocking me, and I came running home crying, and I bawled. I shook, and it's just like, all of this comes up and it wells up inside of me. It says, Mom, they're just all laughing at me. They're just making fun of me. I can't see anything without them laughing at me. And my mother wrapped my arm around me. She goes, Jim, the world is cruel. It will always be cruel. And as long as you allow others to define you, you're their slave. And after that year, it was just like I had never learned how to talk. I mean, I was just a wreck. And so when people make fun of you, you either, well, what I did, you either bashed them in the face. That worked for a while. And then I had to come up with another way of doing it, and it was to make a joke. But that never took away the pain. And even people who were my closest friends, I had one of my best friend actually in 11th grade. I was asked to stand up and give an answer in history class, and as was my method, I got up and stuttered. And there was a group of guys on the back wall who just, back of the room, just all burst out into laughing. The teacher didn't tell them to shut up. The teacher didn't tell them to act respectfully, but let them laugh. And I turned around and looked, and my best friend was in the midst of them. Yeah. And I really chewed him out afterwards. He says, I just got caught up. But I learned that day, it's just like, you can't trust people. So I excelled at sports because I wanted to prove to them I was better than they were. I excelled at education because I wanted to prove I was better than they were. My life was wrapped around proving I was better than, but every time I opened my mouth, I demonstrated I wasn't. Though I was voted happiest-go-luckiest kid in the school, I don't think anybody had any idea how very desperately lonely I was. I got to college. I finally got to the point where I just kind of gave up, and my best friend, the one that laughed at me, he was now into dealing drugs, and he kept trying to get me to do drugs, and I thought, oh, heck, I don't care. And started doing certain things with him, and went looking for a guy. I heard there was a guy on my dorm floor, his name was also Jim, who was the biggest drug dealer on campus. I thought, man, I am in. And I met him in the laundry room, and I said, Jim, I heard you do drugs. And he goes, no, I don't do that anymore. I go, you don't? He goes, no, why? He says, I found Jesus. Well, this is 1972. I didn't know this Jesus movement thing was going on. And I was convinced that he needed saved. And so I made it my mission to save him from this. We would argue all the time, and the more I argued, the more I realized he had exactly what I wanted. He had a peace that I didn't have. He had an assurance I didn't have. My mother could tell me not to be in bondage to anybody else, but he didn't seem to be in bondage to anybody else. And after a number of months of arguing with him, I ended up giving my life to Christ. But shortly after that, Jim said to me, hey, you ought to pray and ask God to take that stuttering away. And I said, oh, Jim, I said, God's running the universe. I mean, he's got so many things on his plate. I mean, I really appreciate this salvation thing. He's really changed my life. So many things have happened. I said, okay, I'll pray about it. He goes, oh, well, you need to have a date. And I go, a date? He goes, yeah. I mean, you don't just pray and maybe someday. But I thought, okay, well, God, in Genesis, he created the heavens and earth in 6 days. So I gave God 6 days to take my stuttering away. And at the end of 6 days, I stuttered just the same. And for me, probably the greatest act of faith I've ever done, more than giving my life to Christ originally, though that was a huge act of faith. When that night, I said, God, if you want me to be a stutterer, I will embrace it. And rather than fighting it, rather than resenting it, rather than being angry over it, if you want me to be a stutterer, I'll be a stutterer. And that was my prayer that Saturday night. And Monday morning, we were walking to class, and the friends that I was walking with, they all fell back. And I turned around and I said, hey, what's up? Why did you fall back? Did I not use dial? They laughed and they said, no, you're not stuttering. And I said, I'm not. And they go, no, you're not. What happened? So I told them the story. It was just the most amazing thing that had ever happened to me. And part of, for me, was I thanked God and I was willing to live with what he gave me. And it truly was. I thought that was another way of manipulating him. And they took me to a church on a Sunday night and said, here, share your testimony. Okay, talking with my friends, walking down the street. I don't stutter, but now I'm in the most terrifying place a stutterer can be. Up front. All eyes looking at you. Nothing that you can hide behind. I hated speech classes. Anything that got me up front. And there I was. I stood up front and I shared my whole testimony without stuttering through a part of it. And it's like, wow, God, what have you done with me? Shortly after that, Jim asked me I had a good friend, his name was Lee, and he said, Jim, you ought to share with Lee what God's done in your life. I said, yeah, I should. And so I took the 4 laws and I stuttered over every word. And I thought, oh no, it's come back. I was so humiliated. I just wanted to crawl on. We were in his dorm room. I wanted to crawl under the bed but I went through all the way the 4 laws, and I literally stuttered. It took an hour. It took an hour to go through it, and I didn't ad lib. I just was reading it. I got to the prayer, and I said, do you want to pray? And I just wanted out of that room. And he said, yes. And I looked at him and said, yes. Why? He said, whatever has happened in your life, I want it. And I thought, and I literally said this, but I stuttered through the whole thing. How could you possibly believe in God when I stuttered through the whole thing? He says, your life has changed. I want what you have. And I found there were times that I still, like now, stuttered. I prayed and I prayed and I prayed. And I said, God, please take this away. Why did you leave this? And very clearly I heard back from God, there's reasons. One, to keep you humble. When you get too full of yourself, when you think too highly of yourself, you'll stutter. When you think too much about what others are thinking about you, you'll stutter. And I tell people I stutter and they laugh. They say, no, you don't. And they can't begin to comprehend what God has done. And so, though I talk fine, I'm still that little boy that everybody used to laugh at and make fun of inside. And I'm constantly giving that demon over to God. I'm constantly giving it up to him. And so if I were to say anything to anybody, whatever your disability is, God can use you. How many of us live our lives allowing others to define us and to come to a place where you've learned that now I have a definition. I am a son of the Most High God. I've been redeemed. I can't get bigger or higher than I already am. And I'm not defined by what others think of me. I'm defined by him. The only voice that matters is his. The only eyes that matter are his. He will reach the nations through a stammering tongue. And I came across that verse. And I realized, here I am, Mr. Stammering Tongue, who God did a miracle in my life and has given me the opportunity to travel the world, to declare his glories with a stammering tongue.